request for qualifications for Bull's Head Plaza and the Bull's Head area, which is generally known as the Bull's Head redevelopment. As you see on the cover sheet here, there is in the upper left-hand corner the actual Bull's Head, which was saved and is in a safe place that we can't disclose. And we will be talking today about the request for qualifications document that was sent out, and we'll be answering questions at the end for folks who have questions about this. When we get to the Q&A section, there will be a Q&A box. Actually, it's there now at the bottom of the screen. So you can type questions in at any point as you go along. We will answer them all at the end. We do have a panel of experts from City Hall who will be answering the questions on the areas of their specialty. And the meeting is being recorded, so if you do need to go back and see any part of the meeting again, it will be available after we're done on the web page for the request for qualifications, and that information will also be reported again at the end. So thanks everyone for joining in today. I will introduce the panelists when we get to the Q&A section, but I will start right now with Rick Rinsky. Rick is part of the housing area of our Neighborhood and Business Development Department. He has been the project shepherd of this project for quite a long time now. And if there's anything to be known about Bull's Head, Rick knows it. So Rick, why don't you go ahead with your presentation, and then we'll, when you're finished, go to Q&A.
Sure, thanks, Dana. Hi, everyone. Again, my name is Rick Rinsky. I'm with the City of Rochester's Neighborhood and Business Development Department, project manager for Bull's Head revitalization for some years now. I won't necessarily disclose how many, but the process has been going on for a while, and we're very excited to be at this point in time where the city is interested in partnering with a private sector development entity to advance the what we have is a vision for redevelopment at Bull's Head. So yeah, what you see at the left-hand side of the screen right now is the general presentation of that vision. So with that, I'll go into some more of the nuts and bolts of this development opportunity. And as Dana mentioned, after the presentation, you may type any questions you have in your question box. Those will be queued, and we will get to those questions and answer those during the question and answer session. So with that, I'll advance here. So this is, for those of you who may not be familiar with the Rochester area, we are a Great Lakes city, and it's a wonderful asset, and we are, as this graphic points out, the subject area is sort of in the middle of the city of Rochester, off to the west side. For those of you who are from or familiar with Rochester, it's Bull's Head area is considered sort of the western gateway to downtown along West Main Street. And I'll just point out a few things, I guess, relevant to the location of Bull's Head. Hopefully my cursor here is visible. Dana, are you seeing that? Okay, thank you. So West Main Street running relatively east and west through the city of Rochester. Oh, I lost my cursor. There it is along here. Genesee Street, which is a major commercial corridor running north and south, is right here. And as you can see, this red boundary here is denoting delineating the what we're calling the targeted redevelopment area, and that's actually the area that we have been completing land assembly in for the purposes of redevelopment. The area in its entirety is just over 12 acres, and I know in our RFQ we mentioned that, But I'll also mention that to some degree, you know, some of that includes right of way, some of it includes some properties that we do not intend to be part of the city's disposition for redevelopment. And I'll get into that a little bit later. And I'd also like to point out that St. Mary's Hospital is a major stakeholder, major presence in the Bull's Head neighborhood, certainly the largest employer in the neighborhood, something that folks who may not be familiar with this area should take into account as we proceed in the considerations for this opportunity. I wanted to provide what you just saw kind of sneak up from the bottom of your screen there, that yellow boundary. That's the same as the red boundary that I just described to you. It's that 12+ acres redevelopment targeted area that we're talking about in this RFQ. I wanted to sort of present that in the context of two other sort of study areas, planning areas, if you will, that the cities has undertaken. The larger blue area that you'll see here is the boundary for a study area for the what's known as the Bull's Head Brownfield Opportunity Area study, and that resulted in a revitalization plan that was through a grant administered by the New York State Department of State through their Brownfield Opportunity Area program. And it was essentially a community-based planning effort for that entire area, and certainly includes, and to some degree focuses on, for redevelopment anyway, the area in yellow. The next sort of smaller area within the blue boundary is that magenta boundary. That is the Bull's Head Urban Renewal Area. So that area has received a lot of planning effort spearheaded by the city and the community that actually precedes the BOA, that blue boundary, and I'll get into that in a minute. But I wanted to just draw your attention to that sort of more focused area at the convergence of these major arterials that we have here at Bull's Head, namely West Main Street, West Avenue, and if I can get my cursor back, there we go, Chilai Avenue, and Brown Street coming here. So there's West Avenue, there's Chilai Avenue, here's West Main, there's Brown, and again, there's Genesee Street coming up. They're all sort of arterials that converge at Bull's Head. And that's in large part how the community focused on the areas that sort of at the convergence of those arterials became sort of a impetus, if you will, for redevelopment. And the community and the city both look at the area within the yellow as sort of a first phase of revitalization and redevelopment. So the hope is that with successful redevelopment of the area within the yellow boundary, we can leverage that investment and leverage the successes from that into other areas of the urban renewal area, which again is in the magenta. And ultimately, we hope that will spawn some energy and some priority for within the community to address issues that we've identified in the overall BOA area, which is again is in the blue boundary. So I just wanted to provide some context, some sort of planning study area context for this redevelopment site. Speaking of the planning context and the planning processes, I wanted to discuss a little bit what has gone on for the planning, the community planning of Bull's Head. The planning process itself started, as far as my involvement anyway, and really I think where things sort of took off goes back to 2009. We had a public community planning process that looked at most of the area that you saw in that yellow boundary. Not quite all of it. It sort of evolved over time to include portions to the south. But that's really how this started. And that's how the urban renewal area and then the subsequent urban renewal plan came to be as well. Now along the way, during that is when the Brownfield Opportunity Area process started. So here's what I'm talking about, that one planning process actually kind of branched out into two simultaneous planning processes, namely the urban renewal planning process that was complete. The first stage of that was completed in 2018. And again, that speaks to that magenta area that we saw on the last slide. And also about 4.5 years ago, we implemented the Bull's Head Brownfield Opportunity Area Revitalization Plan and the associated boundary that you saw on the last slide, which was that blue, that sort of bigger area. And that was just recently completed at the end of 2019. For folks who may know the Brownfield Opportunity Area process in New York State, as administered by the Department of State, that was a step 2 nomination phase that we completed. So that really resulted in the revitalization plan that was submitted to the Department of State, so that we then can get official designation from Department of State for the official BOA designation, Brownfield Opportunity Area designation. And with that designation, as it's outlined in the RFQ, there are benefits and advantages for subsequent grants that the city and/or a developer partner may pursue, and also some tax credits if a brownfield cleanup program is implemented on any of the sites within the project area. The planning processes and the process collectively that we undertook with the community included numerous public meetings, workshops, design workshops. We had a project advisory committee established for the process. So we had multiple of those meetings and other forms of community engagement. We even had a community fair at one point to sort of spread the word and get folks engaged who otherwise weren't maybe aware of the process that was happening. Again, just for the sake of getting as many people involved from the community as possible. All these public meetings that I speak of were held at St. Mary's Hospital, that major facility that I showed you in the aerial a couple slides ago. They were all very well attended meetings. As I mentioned here in this slide, we averaged around 90 attendees for each of the meetings. It was pretty amazing actually to see the turnout that we had. Especially Bull's Head, for those of you who know the area and are familiar locally, there's not a sense, there's currently not a sense of an official Bull's Head neighborhood. Well, there isn't an official Bull's Head neighborhood. There's also not a very strong identity with any particular neighborhood or group or organization. In that respect, it's somewhat marginalized, although there are tangent to sort of that center area of Bull's Head, neighborhood groups and organizations that are strong and that have stepped up and to become part of this process. So given that, I think it was amazing to have the turnout at these meetings that we did. And yeah, absolutely, the surrounding neighborhoods that I just mentioned and community stakeholders, businesses, the hospital, other institutions in the area, and residents were all part of the makeup of the planning process. And what this ultimately ended up with, what we got, the takeaway from this process was a very strong voice from the community to reposition Bull's Head, bring it back to what it once was. And we've shown you in the RFQ document sort of the history and the sort of the evolution of the identity of Bull's Head. And it really was a strong, vital hub for the community. And it's really lost a lot of that character now. And the community really wants to bring that back. During this planning process, we, in the urban renewal plan document, again, which is one of the part of the documentation made available for the RFQ, sort of focused on land use within that redevelopment area. So again, you see this red boundary here, which is kind of making up the eastern portion of the Bull's Head urban renewal area, which is the blue boundary on this graphic. And again, the community felt and the city agreed that we need to start somewhere. We need to make this manageable. We're not going to look at everything at once. So let's start here. This is hopefully going to be a catalyst for development and revitalization throughout once things really start to get going. And this map is showing what sort of resulted and culminated after many planning discussions and community discussions about land use and how these land uses would work together within this context at this particular location. And I say that, but some of the themes here are really not that unique to what we see in the city. We're looking at, in this sort of orangey brown color here, just trying to emphasize a gateway corridor. So this is the commercial corridor coming through the Bull's Head area. So land uses that we're looking at and emphasizing include mixed use, commercial, retail, really emphasizing retail on this particular area. Public and community services and upper floor residential potential. So those kind of mixed uses that you would see in sort of a more built up dense area at such a city node like this. This sort of gold tone area along the east side of Genesee Street has somewhat a similar context or flavor to the gateway corridor. We're calling it the neighborhood corridor land use area, just because it emphasizes a little bit less retail and maybe some more public and community service type uses. But again, its location across from St. Mary's Hospital might inform some synergy and some relationships that would lead to certain land uses there. These sort of blue zones up on the north on west of West Main Street and south of West Main Street, you know, the further we're coming off of these commercial corridors, we're starting to enter much more built up residential areas. And so the land use themes speak to that. Perhaps some mixed use, but again, we're starting to emphasize more of the residential uses and public uses in those areas. So that's sort of just a glimpse of the thinking where this planning led to in terms of land use in Bull's Head. With that, I want to come back to that image that you saw on the opening slide, which was sort of the redevelopment concept vision for Bull's Head in this targeted redevelopment area. And juxtaposed with that is on the left side of your screen is the existing aerial of this location. And really, I just wanted to go through sort of briefly the thinking behind the development of this concept. There's a lot going into this concept and this build out. There's a lot of information, a lot of input from the community. There's some logistical things that we learned along the way, some very serious concerns with the transportation and the traffic patterns here. In some extent, the traffic patterns and the situation there are unsafe conditions, both for vehicles and pedestrians. If you go back to the existing here on the left, this intersection here of West Main Street, Brown Street, and Genesee Street is a very problematic intersection, again, both for vehicles and pedestrian circulation. We have the same level of issues, but slightly different issues here at, this is York Street here, intersecting with what becomes right here West Avenue and Child Avenue and West Main Street. So both of these intersections, which are both key intersections in this development area, have significant issues. And that really informed sort of what we're showing in the concept plan as the new transportation, the right-of-way modifications that we're showing here. For example, this is Genesee Street right here as it exists. We're showing a northerly extension of that to meet up with a realigned extension of Brown Street. So over here where Brown Street came in at this angle to West Main Street, this is showing a realignment of Brown. So it's a little bit further north and actually creates by doing that, creates a new development site along West Main Street. So along that commercial corridor that we want to strengthen. And the two meet. We're showing if I can get my cursor again, we're showing a roundabout as a solution there. We've looked at this. We've done a completed traffic impact study to support this thinking. But at the end of the day, that could be a signalized intersection. It could be a roundabout. We're just showing it right now as a roundabout, and think that that would work nicely to solve these issues. We also show in this concept the termination of vehicular traffic, vehicular circulation at the southern end of York Street, as it used to meet West Avenue and sort of where West Main and West Avenue come together. That was another significant point. Whoop, I think I went back or went forward, advanced. Okay, so that intersection was brought up by the community and experts in the field, if you will, including the Monroe County Department of Transportation, with significant issues. So as you read the RFQ and you look more into the documentation that we have, and including the documents that were presented during the planning process, you'll see how we address those. I don't want to go into too much detail on all these elements, but we've included protected bike lanes, certain crossings with certain distances that are making pedestrian circulation safer, certain signals and certain lane changes, turning lanes. So there's a lot into this concept really that is meant to mitigate the issues that were discovered along the way. So coming off of the right-of-way changes that we're showing, you'll see that there are a lot of sort of what we're calling or showing as building footprints, sort of new proposed development, and those are in the gray sort of tone throughout this area. I just want to spend a little time commenting on the thought behind that. What the purpose of this overall concept as far as redevelopment goes was to show what does 12 acres look like when it's redeveloped. It may be hard to sort of to imagine 12 acres available for redevelopment in the middle, right in the middle or the heart of a once formerly developed urban area. So if you have a large part of that being sort of a clean slate, if you will, what might that look like? And really that's the purpose for showing a lot of these footprints. It isn't to be taken literally. We understand that, you know, there are many different ways to solve getting certain uses and densities in this area, but this was just our take on how it might look when fully built out. And we also wanted to use it as a full build out scenario to test against, for example, with the traffic impact study. So there were certain assumptions made with how many floors these footprints would have, the uses that they would have, and trip generations, parking that would be required, that kind of thing. So yeah, I guess that's enough. And by the way, during the question and answer, if we want to come back to this screen or any other screen, we can absolutely do so. I'm going to advance to the next screen now, which is going to bring us back to that concept, that redevelopment concept vision plan, and spend a little time on this. What we're trying to emphasize here is the idea that, okay, we've looked at streets, we've looked at how to fully build out 12 acres. Again, we don't want the takeaway to be though that we've solved this from a development standpoint. We know the uses we want. We know sort of the feel, the look and the feel that the community wants in Bull's Head. But in large part, you know, if we were to say that, okay, we realign Brown Street, here we go with the cursor, Brown Street again, coming into some intersection with a northern extension of Genesee Street. We've created a parcel along West Main Street, and we're starting to look at how we can create parcels in this area north of West Main Street. The extension here of Brown Street through an intersection, that's not necessarily part of the plan. It's showing one solution of how something like that might connect to York Street, just to complete sort of a grid type thing. But what I'm showing in these blue areas is really, you know, for you, the developer, your mindset that, hey, how would I treat these? What might I do in these areas? and maybe you might combine this area with this area and have something else shown. Really, it's just to sort of emphasize what we're thinking is almost sort of a clean slate here for your thoughts. That said, there are a few things that I wanted to point out that as part of the redevelopment plan will stay. There are a few structures, a few properties in that category. And again, trying to get my cursor. Here we go. There are two buildings right here. They're fairly historic buildings on the corner of West Main Street and where York Street exists right now that we anticipate staying as part of the redevelopment of Bull's Head. And moving south to the south side of West Main Street, there is a building at the corner of Clifton Street and Genesee Street right here. It's actually a laundromat. We envision as part of the redevelopment plan subdividing the property that laundromat currently resides on and selling that portion to the operator of the laundromat. And then so that building would actually, and that operation would stay. This is 160 Clifton. We're showing that as a building that stays as well. That's an interesting building. The city does own it and would not want to demolish it. It's got good bones and actually has a feature that's fairly rare in these types of neighborhoods outside of downtown, and that's that it has underground parking. It's actually has underground parking for 45 vehicles. So that makes it an asset, at least from that function of parking for the overall redevelopment plan. So again, I wanted to point out that there's four properties, four structures, if you will, that will stay as part of the redevelopment plan. Outside of that, in those blue areas, it's almost a have at it type scenario, but to some degree, with some considerations and parameters established by the planning process. Also should point out, I guess on this map, there's a Walgreens here with their parking lot along West Main Street. And again, just emphasizing the presence of St. Mary's Hospital, major stakeholder in the community. So with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Dana to transition us from that presentation to the question and answer session.
Great, thanks, Rick. Appreciate your presentation. That was very well done, and I'm sure there will be some questions. So there are a few people who are joining us at this point in time. If you see the slide there, I am Dana Miller, and the Deputy Commissioner of Neighborhood and Business Development for the city. We also have with us today Carol Wheeler, who works in business and housing development and is the manager of housing. You've already met and heard from Rick Rinsky, who is also part of Neighborhood and Business Development. We have Joe Biondolillo, who has joined us from the Department of Environmental Services and is really one of the most knowledgeable people we have, I would say just in City Hall, but actually anywhere on environmental conditions on properties in the city. So he will be here to help address any questions regarding environmental conditions. Jill Wiedrich is here, and she's also part of Neighborhood and Business Development and is our manager of zoning. And Paul Scuderi is available. He's not one of the panelists, or actually he may very well be at this point. Paul works in our department as well as Director of Real Estate. So those are the folks who are available today to answer questions. We also have another member of our organization, Lindsay Nabozny, who is acting as kind of the director and traffic cop today. So she will be monitoring the questions and answers as they come through. Just a reminder, this entire meeting is recorded and will be available on the website after we're done. So we're prepared at this point to answer questions from any of the participants in the conference. Do we have any questions, Lindsay?
We don't have any questions yet. There should be a Q&A button at the bottom of everybody's screen. So, oh, okay, here's one. Is there any status update on the BOA designation?
Okay, thanks, Lindsay. Yeah, I can speak to that. There isn't. We do know that that process can last 6 or more months. We submitted the nomination package to Department of State on that the end of last year, so in December, or it may have been December or January, but right around the end of the year. I've been checking in, and I've been hearing bits and pieces from Department of State about, something that I think we've all been hearing lately about COVID's been causing some delays, that kind of thing. So we're hoping to hear back soon, but we unfortunately don't know when that'll be.
Okay, no more questions at the moment. If anybody has any more, feel free to enter them into the Q&A box.
Okay, so while we're waiting to see if there are any other questions, I just want to add a couple of comments around Rick's presentation, which was very well done. We have, at this point in time, a site, as Rick mentioned, that's approximately a little over 12 acres. That's about double the size of the filled-in portion of the inner loop. And what we found with that filled-in portion of the inner loop is that there was tremendous interest. We didn't know when the decision was made to fill that in whether it would be an attractive opportunity or not. But it's actually turned out to be extremely attractive. We took that 6-acre site, divided it into 7 parcels, and issued requests for proposals for each of the 7 parcels, and then chose developers for those parcels based on their submissions. We actually decided to do this process a little bit differently. Rather than dividing the site up arbitrarily and perhaps precluding some uses, we opted to just issue a request for qualifications for the entire site. And what we would expect as a result of this is, based on the responses that we receive, we would like to enter into a period of exclusive negotiations with an organization that would then help determine what would happen with these 12 plus acres. But we certainly would expect that some portion of this 12 acres, as Rick showed in the one diagram, would include some kinds of retail commercial uses. That could include retail commercial first floor and housing on upper floors. We would also expect to see some opportunity for housing. We also know that with St. Mary's Hospital, which is now part of Rochester Regional Health System, we know that there is interest in health-related uses. There are some other health-related uses in the area currently, but there'd certainly be opportunities for more. And I just want to add that we have met and continue to meet with the folks at Rochester Regional Health. They are in the process of and have recently completed major additions to the building. They have completely built out a brand new OB/GYN and pediatrics unit in the first floor of the building. There is currently on the second and third floor a nursing home facility, and on the 4th and 5th floors, they're preparing to build out some additional hospital space. So we do see that facility continuing for some time, so that we don't believe is any danger of it going dark, and that's why we continue to work with them. They do have 2 other buildings on the campus, the Bishop Kearney building, which has medical offices in it, and their former professional building was converted to 33 units of housing for seniors several years ago. They also have a very large, you can see it in the kind of the big square white box there, they have a very large parking garage on the structure, which they've just made major enhancements to including providing charging stations for electric vehicles. So they are continuing to maintain that facility, and we see that as being a tremendous asset as we go forward with the area. So I do see that there are some more questions now. I'll turn this back over to Lindsay.
Okay. We've got a few more questions. I will read these in the order that they came in. The first is, was there a market study developed to support the proposed uses?
Yeah, I can answer that. There was a market study. It's a market study light, if you will, and it's actually included in the RFQ. So if you want to go back to that document after this webinar, you can review it. It made a certain set of assumptions. One of the things I want to state is that for commercial uses, for example, in retail, the study looked at the area as it existed when there were certain uses still in Bull's Head. Unfortunately, through various from various conditions or reasons, we've lost some of that retail and commercial along this corridor, specifically even in the redevelopment site for the purposes of assembling the site. So I would just say that take that into account when you're considering this, that the city overall and in this, certainly in this quarter, the amount of retail and commercial has been reduced a little bit through from various reasons, and specifically within this development site. Part of that was for land assembly itself.
Okay. Next question is regarding commercial space. Does the city have a percentage they would like included in the development?
I'll take that one as well, Lindsay. Certainly along the commercial corridor that we discussed, along West Main Street and West Avenue, we really want to strengthen the commercial corridor there. We don't have a set amount of square feet or percentage for that, but I think to the extent that we can strengthen that commercial corridor, we're going down the right path.
Could you speak to some of the benefits and/or tax incentives that may be available to prospective developers?
So, and I can start with that one. I don't know if it might evolve to someone else chiming in. Generally speaking, the city, anyway, the City of Rochester has multiple programs that might be able to be, and probably in many cases would be applied to redevelopment of Bull's Head. There are property tax abatement programs. There are loans and grant programs. There isn't a program specific for Bull's Head, but there are, the kind of things that you would normally expect to see from a municipality to infuse energy and economic development strength into a project is, what one I think should expect for something in this magnitude. Beyond that, I don't know, Joe, did you want to speak to the tax credit program associated with the Brownfield cleanup program?
Yes. If a particular developer property owner were to enter the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation Brownfield cleanup program, the BCP, would be potentially eligible for tax credits through that program. I believe our information that we've put out regarding the RFQ talks about a 5% bump up for those BCP sites in a designated BOA. In addition, the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation does have a pretty good website that you can go to, and you can look up the different brownfield tax credits that might be available to you should you join that program, enroll in that program. And I would encourage anybody who's interested in that to work with their attorneys and their consultants to better figure out what those tax credits might be.
Well, one other thing, and it's not necessarily a tax incentive, but it is perhaps a benefit. As you look at the map of the area that's on the left side of the screen here, which is the current, or pretty close to the current state, you'll notice that a large portion of this is vacant land. And that's because the city has been engaged for many years in a process of acquiring and then clearing the land. We are continuing to do that. So the buildings that are remaining there will be removed. We have acquired all of them at this point, and we're in the process of going through, preparing for the demolition of the three that, or the four that Rick just pointed at: the old post office building, the diner, another, and two houses. In addition, the entire Bull's Head Plaza, the 1947 built plaza that sits at the bottom of the site, will also be demolished. So, if someone was looking at this and thinking, well, boy, I might be interested, but the cost of taking all of that down is going to be outrageous, we do intend to do that. So at the point that someone might be looking to move forward with this site, we would anticipate that it would be cleared.
And Dana, to piggyback on that just a bit, since we are pointing out, sort of the rest of the land assembly activities that we're doing in the demolitions, I pointed out 2 residential buildings where the cursor is now, and then a commercial building here and a commercial building on Brown Street. There is one more, actually. There's a 5th, and it's a 1-story building right here on West Main Street that's abutting the next 2 that I described earlier as being demolished. So that 1-story building, and actually this 1-story building behind this property, both of those are to be demolished as well.
Thanks. You're right. Thank you.
Okay. Next question. Is there an appraised value for the site?
I'll answer that. There is not an appraised value, really, because there isn't a site yet. There isn't a site to sell. That we are in the process of finalizing that land assembly. As Dana just pointed out, some of the remaining activities for demolition. We also have environmental cleanup activities. In some cases, still some environmental testing. We need to finalize that process, but we're conceiving, sort of having this developer partner on board as we finish that process. So no, the answer is no. We don't have an appraised value, but that would certainly be a step, and is a required step, in fact, to sell city-owned property.
Next one, related to the city's analysis of zoning and land use, are there building height restrictions to be considered? Are such restrictions variable depending on the location within the site?
So that's where we are right now with the, if you saw this reference in the RFQ document, we've completed the first stage of the urban renewal plan. We're now completing the second stage. And that second stage includes, in large part, the zoning work in the urban renewal district. So I guess the answer, if I recall the question correctly, the answer is yes. That we will be applying zoning regulations as appropriate for those uses and their locations. For example, there would definitely be a difference between height restrictions or in land uses on West Main Street in what we are trying to do, in a stronger commercial corridor versus something that's directly across the street from a single-family residential, as you get towards closer to the residential areas.
Okay. Has the city seen any interest in opportunity zones generally, and does it envision such interest in Bull's Head?
Daniel, would you want to take that?
Yes, I would be happy to. So we are fortunate that the entire area that we're discussing here does fall in an opportunity zone area. When the city was given the opportunity to participate in that, we were asked to identify areas that would be included in the opportunity zone process. We were limited, however. I mean, New York State had a complete and total limit to how many you could have. So while we would have liked to have perhaps made the whole city an opportunity zone, we were limited in doing that. So we ended up picking 5 areas. The area near the lake, or is the lakefront opportunity zone. We have an area that's near and around Eastman Business Park, which is the industrial opportunity zone. And this area falls pretty much completely in the west side neighborhoods opportunity zone. So we hope that the opportunity zone provides some benefit to folks who might be looking at either establishing a qualified opportunity fund and using that to help provide resources to do a project like this, or people who already have a qualified opportunity fund and are looking for places to invest. So we certainly hope that there would be interest in this area because it falls in an opportunity zone. In general, across the city, however, we've not seen a tremendous amount of interest in opportunity zones. We did get one interested party at the lake that expressed an interest in an opportunity zone, but that did not pan out. So we certainly would like to see more opportunity zone use, but we've not seen it just yet.
That was the last question we've received. If anybody has any additional or any follow-ups, feel free to enter them in the Q&A box. Otherwise, that's it for now.
Okay. Thanks again, everyone. Appreciate your attendance and interest here. I'll just leave you with this final slide here with a reminder of our submission deadline, of course, 4 o'clock, September 28th, and my contact information, all of which is included already in the RFQ. And just a reminder on the bottom there of the website for the RFQ in case any of you have not gone to that yet.
Okay, well, great work, everyone. We apologize again for the fact that we would normally have had a meeting like this, perhaps in a place like City Council chambers, and have more of an opportunity, have more of a dialogue. Given our circumstances, this was our next best opportunity. I really would like to thank all of the panelists today for pitching in and helping make this happen. I'd like to thank Lindsay for directing traffic and monitoring the Q&A, and particularly to thank Rick for pulling all of this together. Not only this meeting today, not only the presentation today, but the whole RFQ and the other work, all of the maps that you've seen and everything, the work with DOT and the traffic folks. I mean, this, Rick has really been Rick's child for quite some time now. So
Thanks, Dana.
thank you. If anyone has questions later on, please feel free to contact Rick at the contact information here, and he'd be happy to either address the questions or pass them on to the rest of us. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.